the most fun I've had playing StarCraft is oftentimes when I just pull out strategies, like I said, like proxy nexusing trap. That's pretty fun. I can't think about that without smiling a little bit. Stuff like that. Like, I played 2 Robo, double disruptor drop versus Rainer and IEM. It's like these kind of meme strategies, but they're actually good. Yeah. But they just seem like they shouldn't be good. But playing stuff like that always makes me a bit excited.
Hey, SC Historian here. Today I have on the defending American StarCraft champion from Matcherino Esports, it's Astrea. Max and I had a great chat ranging from his thoughts on the latest balance patch to his life in Korea and so much more. If you're enjoying what I do here, get subscribed so you don't miss out on releases with amazing guests like this. If you really love what I've been putting out, consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the video description. With that said, let's jump in to my word with Astrea.
So, Astrea, thank you so much for taking the time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for coming out here.
Yeah, and of course for inviting me into Sasha's home. So, the customary question, how did you first get into StarCraft?
So I first got into StarCraft in middle school. Basically just one of my friends at the time introduced me to the game. I really liked the game from the first time I played it. So from that day on, I just kept playing. Yeah.
Were you pretty familiar with any RTSs prior to that?
No, that was my first RTS. I was into a lot of games before then, but from different genres. So yeah.
That makes sense. Have there ever been any other games that you got really involved in?
Yeah, I mean it's a bit embarrassing, but I was really into Call of Duty before before I started playing StarCraft. Maybe 6th grade, 7th grade. I played so much.
It's not
embarrassing.
Great. It's a popular game. Yeah. Maybe not my cup of tea.
Yeah, not my cup of tea anymore.
Yeah,
but I was really into it.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything embarrassing about that. But so. I think you became a really interesting character in the StarCraft scene, but specifically the North American StarCraft scene, right? Where I think if we wind the clock back a couple of years, you were obviously a very good player and a super high-level competitor in the North American scene, but it seemed like you had this period of metamorphosis and sort of transcendence to a kind of a real global level competitor. What do you think accounts for that? What changed?
I really think that was just when I came to Korea for the first time. I think that was probably when I made it the first of massive growth spurt, I guess, so to speak. Because I played a little bit through college. I went to college before going full-time, but not really that much. And after I graduated college, I decided to go to Korea for a bit, just to, have some fun and test it out and maybe try to be a pro gamer for a bit. And that's actually, I stuck with it for a lot longer than I thought I would after that. So, but yeah, I'm coming to Korea for the first time and really practicing on the Korean ladder full time, I would say.
What do you think holds back other high quality North American competitors from making that leap? Do you really think being in Korea, is the thing, or obviously there are other really good North American players, but there's a lot of other North American players that have kind of stayed at the same level for a while, let's say.
Well, if you think about it, every extremely successful North American player has been to Korea.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely part of it, but yeah. I think for a lot of players, I mean, some of them just aren't full-time, they're really good, but they're doing other things. They have a part-time job or they're going to school or whatever. So I don't know. I think being in Korea helps a lot, and just doing it full-time for a while helps a lot.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I think, especially for a lot of North Americans, because when it comes to Europe and Asia to a certain extent, but especially the Europeans, there's so much social support, right? Where you can skate by just making a few $100 a month or whatever playing StarCraft, where in North America you'll starve. So that makes sense, yeah. So I mean, you already kind of touched upon this, but I don't know what about being in Korea do you feel has helped you improve your performance?
For me, it's I don't know if it had to be Korea. Maybe I could have done the same thing from Europe or whatever. But for me, it's just the first time I was actually full time. You know, I've always been doing school before then. And, you know, the reason for my visit was primarily to, you know, try to play StarCraft and, you know, be successful. I mean, obviously there's other reasons that came also to enjoy the food and the culture and the people there. But I guess it's just the first time I was full time and the first time I was pursuing StarCraft single-mindedly.
So when you came to Korea the most recent time, I feel like the prevailing opinion in this community was that you were maybe stepping away from StarCraft or considering that. But now, obviously, you've kind of seen the real rededication. How did that happen for you? What changed?
No, you mean this visit, right?
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was pretty disheartened leading into IEM, and I was feeling a bit frustrated with the game at the time. So yeah, I was thinking after IEM, I was going to take a month or two off and decided, you know, if I want to move on or do something else. So probably during that time, people were just, you know, is he still playing? Is he whatever? But after a month or two, I decided I was trying a few things. I was trying coding for a little bit just for fun, just looking into a few things, trying other stuff. But I decided it'd be better for me and more fun to stick with StarCraft another year at least. So when I made that decision, that was like a few weeks before the regional for North America, and I ended up winning that regional. And I'm like, you know, I might as well come back to Korea and you know, train somewhere.
Yeah, I remember watching that broadcast and Roddy saying, like, every time you know would take a big game, he'd be like, yeah, you know, and this guy's like semi-retired. He said it like kind of a bunch of times. And but yeah, that was like such an impressive, and it felt like a little bit out of the blue run. Like again, because like not because of your skill level or anything, but just because, like I said, I feel like that's what the murmurings in the scene had been, was that you were not as dedicated to the game as you had been prior to that time period. So yeah, so that's really how it played out. You got a bit more back invested into the game. You had a really good performance in that tournament, and that kind of inspired you to come back out here.
Yeah. I was well, ever since I decided, you know, I'm gonna stick with StarCraft, I was thinking about just coming back to Korea again, because it's maybe obvious, but it's hard to practice from North America. The ladder is not as strong. You have to be up at weird hours if you want to play. It really is just better to be in Korea where you play with no ping against good opponents. So, yeah.
Makes sense. So, I mean, you spent a pretty serious amount of time in Korea now. What's your overall impression been here?
About Korea?
Yeah.
I mean, I like Korea. I would say, obviously I like Korea because I've come back a few times now, but I would say I don't engage with the culture so much because I don't speak enough Korean to have, you know, real Korean friends who I interact with in a Korean way, you know, following the social norms or whatever. But I mean, everything that I do use here, I guess, like the restaurants, the public transportation, stuff like that, I only have positive opinions about it, I would say. You know, the general politeness of the people here, even if I don't have long conversations with them or whatever. Yeah.
Have there been any downsides for you personally living in Korea?
There have been. I mean, I like living in San Diego, my hometown, because that's where, you know, most of my friends are and that's where my family is at. So every once in a while, I do feel a bit lonely out here, especially when the house is a little bit less populated with people. Because I can't, like I said, my Korean's okay, but it's not at a level where I can really converse with and have meaningful relationships, I think, with people who only speak Korean. So I'd say that's the biggest downside for me, is just maybe a shortage of people to hang out with and speak English with. Yeah, and other than that, when I'm at home, I don't have to cook meals. It's a lot easier to be fed.
Yeah, I for sure.
Yeah.
I think the relative low cost of food here maybe will help with that, but still, it adds up eventually. Yeah. Okay, cool. So it seems like overall very positive, but I think, you know, the negatives kind of to be expected, right? You move to a foreign country with a completely alien language, and it might be difficult to make connections. So what would you say has been your proudest moment as a StarCraft pro?
My proudest moment? I mean, I think highest accomplishment was probably getting second place in the Home Story Cup, beating Beyond and a lot of other good players, Clem. Home Story Cup 22 maybe, I forget the number, but that's probably my best moment. I don't know if I would consider that my like happiest moment, but it probably my like best accomplishment, you know. So, but I guess since you use the word proud, I kind of take pride in my play style, which is being a bit weird at times. So sometimes I'm like really happy when I beat people in a really special way or pull out strategies that aren't seen before. So like I was also pretty happy whenever I get to pull out a new strategy. I guess that makes me gives me some pride.
That's a really cool take on that. I'm glad that like you're able to derive pleasure and pride from something that isn't necessarily just a result, but your enjoyment of the game. I think that's really positive. So I'm kind of curious about something you just said. You said maybe it wasn't necessarily your happiest moment. Is there a specific memory that stands out as your happiest moment that wasn't the Home Story Cup?
Well, I mean, happiness is a strange word, but I guess for like the most fun I've had playing StarCraft is oftentimes when I just pull out strategies, like I said, like proxy nexusing trap. That's pretty fun. I can't think about that without smiling a little bit. You know?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Like, you know, I played 2 Robo double disruptor drop versus Rainer and IEM. It's like these kind of meme strategies, but they're actually good. Yeah. But they just seem like they shouldn't be good. But playing stuff like that always makes me a bit excited.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool when you pull it off against a player you really respect. Yeah. So, do you feel like you have a specific goal in this point in your career as a player?
No. I mean, goals have been something I've thought about a lot, and in general, I think my approach to goals is that I really don't set them for myself too often. I mean, I guess I really just strive to improve, you know, and try to make my play better. And if that gives me results, that's great. I mean, it should give me results over time if you're playing better, right? But I never am comfortable, I guess, setting a specific goal, like, okay, I'm going to win this event or get top 8 at this event, because a lot of that is up to chance and how well your opponent is playing, and maybe you got unlucky with the builds or whatever. So I'm generally not a fan of setting those type of goals.
So how did you end up choosing Protoss as your main race?
My friend just told me to play Protoss. The same friend who introduced me to StarCraft. I started out with Terran because that's like the tutorial race, Wings of Liberty or whatever. Like, but yeah, I switched to Protoss and learned how to 4-gate, and that got me to Diamond.
Yeah, 4-gate is also what got me out of Bronze. Yeah, now that I think back on that. Sometimes it's really interesting stories about people picking the races, and sometimes it's just like, my friend told me.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the overall state of balance right now in StarCraft 2?
Asking the hard-hitting questions, I see. I mean, honestly, the state of balance, a lot of people are angry about whatever races, but it's probably pretty good right now, to be honest, compared to all the times it's been in the past. It's like in a pretty good spot.
I'm 100% in agreement on that, right? Like, I think it's good and it's important for the community in general for us to have controversy, right? I think this is a natural part of a healthy community is to have disagreement and stuff. But I 1,000% agree with that contention that, like, if you look back on the balance issues we had in the past, the things that are now are seem like the world's tiniest problems. Yeah. When you look at like Broodlord Infestor era or Swarm Host era, all these time periods where the game was genuinely kind of broken. So at least it feels quite good in that respect. How do you feel about like the most recent patch? Like, what do you think was done correctly with the most recent patch?
So the most recent patch, I think the Terran nerfs were pretty good. I do actually think Protoss was a little bit weak versus Terran in the last patch when because they changed the Raven, right? Now you have to upgrade 50-50 for interference matrix. They changed the Ghost. And they changed a few other small things. So I do think Terran was a little bit too strong last patch. But now, so the Terran nerfs in particular, I think are a good direction from last patch. The Cyclone, I'm not a massive fan of that change. But it's not that bad. It's like it's not broken or anything, right? I'm just not a fan of the direction they took it in.
Any other specific things that you would have done differently, or you think like weren't so great about the patch?
No, I mean, I think overall the patch was pretty good. The Cyclone's obviously, I don't know if it's obvious, but I think it's the most controversial part of the patch. But then they also made some Zerg changes like Broodlord speed and damage and Infester and a few things like that. I think, if anything, it would be good if they had more clear reasons for the change, like if they had a clear direction so we can measure the success of the patch. Yeah, but I don't know. Overall, the patch is not bad, yeah.
Is there anything that you're noticing that is like impacting your actual games day to day? Like any specific parts of the patch that you find are really impactful?
By far, the Ghost and the Raven nerf, I think, are the most impactful. The Cyclone is also impactful because it shows up in times where it doesn't show up before. And there's some new builds because of that. So I think Terran is the most noticeable for sure.
Yeah, I feel like the Cyclone just fills a very different role.
Yeah,
Now. Yeah.
I think that the Cyclone, it's like worse overall, but it's easier to get. So, if you want to play some early, like, the parting build where you build 3 gates and rush like 6 adepts really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like builds like that, random attack builds are just not as good anymore because the Cyclone can pop out so much more easily and stop it. But in general, it's weaker against Stargate and stuff like that. So I don't know.
Gotcha. So you recently joined, or I guess not that recent anymore, but not too long ago you joined Matcherino Esports. How did that come about? How did you get connected with those guys?
Yeah, so Matcherino is kind of like an extension of Team Alpha X, but it's not. But like the same person is in charge, and they have a lot of the same players and the same people.
Yeah.
So I think like there was like a period where they gave me a chance to look for another team, and I didn't really search that aggressively, to be honest. But they gave me a time to look for another team, and they're like, okay, why don't you just come join Team Matcherino? And they gave me pretty much the same support and stuff like that as Alpha X. So yeah,
cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of expectations do you have for yourself going into Atlanta?
It's tough to say. I mean, I think a lot can change from even week to week as a StarCraft player. It's weird, but like you can play really good one week and really bad the next week. And a lot just depends on if you happen to be playing well at the time. I know, like, as a few examples, this is kind of, diverging, but, when Sasha won IEM Pyeongchang, she was telling me about it. She was like playing really good just a week before. After the tournament ended, her level dropped again and she can't figure out why, And similar for Hero, he was at 7,000 MMR on Korea Ladder for a little bit. And then he dropped to like 300 MMR before his GS level match and lost that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of variance and it's hard to say,
You think it's primarily like a psychological thing?
I mean, it has to be, right? I don't know what else it could be. I mean, maybe it's like you're getting bad sleep or whatever for whatever reason, but it's got to be mainly psychological.
So what about Zero Space? Obviously, maybe you have a bit of a bias being really close with Sasha, but any thoughts or feelings on Zero Space?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. Obviously, I have no firsthand information about it. It all comes from Sasha because she's, working on it.
Yeah.
So I really probably shouldn't talk about it too much, but I'm hopeful for it. Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see yourself competing in an RTS other than StarCraft 2, like in the future?
I think it's unlikely, honestly. I think I'll give it a shot if it's popular and it has a decent prize pool or whatever. I mean, if I really like it, maybe I would, but for some reason, I feel like it's just my feelings that it wouldn't be super likely for me.
Like, because I guess my question is like, if the StarCraft 2 scene saw a bit of a demise, then you would just stop competing, or what's your MO there? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Would
you pivot to another game, or would you just pivot to something else in life?
Honestly, I was ready to pivot to something else on life after last Katowice, like I said, honestly. So yeah, like I said, if there was another RTS, I would give it a try, and if I really liked it, I would play it. But otherwise, I think I would move on to something. maybe I'd play it casually or whatever.
Yeah. I think like most hardcore people will try all of these games casually at the very least.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a whole different story to dedicate your life to it, and you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like, what elements, like, you know, what elements does a new RTS have to like capture your attention, right? Like what in an ideal world, like what if you look at a new RTS and it has X, Y, or Z, and you know, what would interest you? What would compel you to play it?
Well, to be honest, StarCraft 2 is basically the only RTS I've ever played. So, I mean, maybe I could answer that question more broadly by talking about what's good and bad about StarCraft.
Sure.
So, I mean, StarCraft is really a very unforgiving game, right? You make one mistake in the early game, in the span of like 2 seconds, you can, you know, maybe you lose like 3 minutes later, or you just can't do anything, right? And a lot of StarCraft is focused on economy. It's really focused on like, if you kill your opponent's workers, a lot of the time that's, you know, what decides the game. So, I mean, I guess that's a good and bad thing about StarCraft. I guess a good thing about StarCraft is that it allows for a lot of creativity, especially if you play Protoss. Yeah, and you know, being creative is not always, but oftentimes rewarded. So, and also it's just fast paced and it feels really good to play StarCraft, right? Just clicking stuff and doing lots of different things feels good. So I guess broadly speaking, I like like pretty intensive multitasking. It feels good to have to do a lot of things and to have your attention limited. It doesn't feel so great to lose because of one mistake at some point in the game. And maybe StarCraft would feel a little better if the battles were slightly longer and it weren't so decisive, you know? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers the question, but maybe some of my broad thoughts.
No, it's an interesting answer. I very much agree with this, the rapidity, or rather how quickly you can lose a whole army. Yeah, this is like kind of an unsatisfactory part of the game to a certain extent. Of course, it's satisfactory when you destroy a whole army.
Sure.
But from a viewer perspective as well, like I find one of the fundamental problems with StarCraft 2 as an esport, and of course I love the esport, but like there's not a lot of comeback potential.
Yeah.
Like once you're in a deficit, you are basically relying on your opponent to make some horrible blunder, and if they don't, you can't really come back. And I don't like that. Like I feel like in StarCraft 1 especially, there's like a lot more. And again, my knowledge of StarCraft 1 is even worse than my knowledge of StarCraft 2, which is already pretty bad compared to high-level players. But it always seems that way to me, that like you're never like, not of course you're not never dead, but it seems like in StarCraft 1 oftentimes there's a significant comeback potential, and I think it's because of this, right? The fact that like engagements are a lot slower, less units, and more potential to eke out advantages. And yeah, I think that is like one of the few real issues with StarCraft 2, because otherwise it's obviously a pretty great game.
I guess one little thing I'd add is that the late games sometimes aren't very interactive. Like there's some games where nothing will happen for a really long period of time, and I don't think those are fun for either the fans or the...
Yeah, and the person who engages first often loses.
Yeah, I don't know how you fix that, but obviously if they could fix that, that'd be a good feature of any game, is have a good late game.
Yeah, not this death ball like...
Yeah, like one death ball, you know.
Yeah, it's not a...
Very campy.
Correct, yeah. And also just like... Yeah, you end up with these sometimes very long periods of time with no action. Yeah, which is obviously super boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So what do you think a new RTS developer can do to help bring in some people that are not really RTS fans into the genre? What do you think prevents RTS from being a little bit bigger as a genre?
Sheesh. it's really tough. I really don't know, but I think if I had to, throw some stuff out there. Even for me as a pro gamer, I thought it was kind of fun to play through the campaign, and I think the 2v2 in StarCraft, 2v2 and fun stuff that isn't just competitive 1v1 is probably pretty useful. So StarCraft is like okay at that, As far as actually getting people into the competitive 1v1 part of the game, I don't know. It's tough. I feel like people enjoy things when they feel like they're learning, improving, and getting better at them. So like if you have that feeling of, it's like kind of being in the flow state, right? Like you feel like you're getting better all the time. That's like what drives people to keep playing the game, and that's what feels good. It's hard to do that continuously in StarCraft for whatever reason for a lot of people.
I think the first part of what you said really hits the nail on the head. I mean, we know for a fact the numbers show that 1v1 is just not the most popular format in StarCraft. And I think that is key. Is for some reason people have a very hard time with the psychological aspect of being responsible for everything. I think it's really nice to rely on teammates. I think obviously also it's a social aspect, right? You want to play a game with your buddies. You don't want to play against one friend and that's it, and that's the only way to do it. Also, of course, it can become a little overwhelming to play the same person again and again. But beyond that, I think this is kind of a natural like cross-pollination though that will happen, right? Like if you have a huge 2v2 scene or 4v4 or whatever, it doesn't matter. A certain percentage of people will eventually probably matriculate to the 1v1 part. But yeah, I think an emphasis on like a successful team format. I think I agree. I think this is a really good way to like get people in. And of course, campaign. The problem with campaign, I think, is that a lot of people play the campaign and finish the campaign. That's it.
True.
They don't engage anymore. So this is another thing, right? Like, how do you have those people move over onto the competitive side of the game? I don't know. It's a difficult question, but
one thing we didn't really talk about was like playing the mental side of StarCraft. And there's been periods when I'm in Korea where I feel like I'm kind of not improving and where I'm slumping, and then there's periods where I feel great, like I'm improving. So it's been kind of an up and down for me a lot. Like sometimes I was really angry, and StarCraft is my life basically. So if I'm not playing well in StarCraft, it's really hard. But and there's times where I feel like I'm really improving rapidly and stuff feels great. But yeah, it's not always it's not like always straight upward trajectory for a lot of StarCraft players, I think, right? A lot of players get these slumping periods or whatever. So we didn't really, touch on that much, but
yeah, no, we can discuss that. Do you feel like the anger is directed at yourself or at the game?
Yeah, when I lose a tough match or whatever. Yeah, I mean, well, at the first instant where I lose the match that I really didn't want to lose, or that something upset that I got tilted and whatever, it's definitely towards balance. I feel like it's like that for most players. Like that's when the balance rage really comes out. Like for the most part, I'd say I'm pretty objective about balance when I'm talking to people, but after I lose a StarCraft game, like I was telling you this earlier, it will take me maybe 5 to 10 minutes to just calm down again and like, okay, move on a little bit. So yeah, definitely if the anger will be directed at the game first. And after a while, if I watch the replay objectively, it's usually I'll be able to figure out what happened and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's not easy to digest a loss and what is effectively a failure, right, in your work, right? Like, and I think calling it a failure is maybe a little harsh, but not living up to what your expectations were, and especially if you feel that like you fell short of the type of performance that you're capable of, I think it's one thing if you really play your heart out and and everything goes well, but you just get outplayed. That sucks, but I think it's a little easier to accept, as opposed to the contrary, right? Where if you feel like you beat yourself more than the opponent did.
Yeah, there's definitely been times where I've lost and I'm like pretty satisfied with the play I played. I'm not angry at all. It's like, okay, I played well, he got me, whatever. But if I don't even get a part of the frustrating thing about StarCraft is sometimes you just lose the game to a cheese or whatever. Like I lost a game a few days ago to Bjorn where he proxy reapered me. He got a bunker up in my natural, and I couldn't get a battery up because it was like right next to the pylon, and then I just had to leave the game at like 3 minutes. It's like stuff like that where the rage really comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting concept. I think Artosis is the perfect example of the duality of that. Where in general he is like a level-headed, smart guy, and he will be the first person to defend somebody for doing like a cheese or something, because it's like, well, that's part of the game, man. Like if he can beat you with it, he can beat you with it. So, but then it happens to him. And all objectivity goes out the window.
Yep.
That is definitely a tricky balance between, loving and appreciating the complexity of the game, and on the flip side, smashing your keyboard because somebody did some nonsense to you. Yeah. But no, that's definitely an interesting take. Do you feel like you get tilted easily, or do you think it's pretty hard to rattle you?
It depends. I feel like there's been times where I've gotten tilted easily. I feel like right now I'm in a pretty good headspace, but there was a time, especially last patch, where Terran was really tilting me. And especially, actually, that's before I, before Katowice last year, Terran was really getting to me, and StarCraft in general. But I don't know. It depends from time to time.
Yeah, I was talking to Creator about this in the interview with him, and of course, at this point, he's almost famous for this problem, and it's a little heartbreaking sometimes. I don't know. It's such a difficult thing to tackle, right? Cause it's like telling somebody who's depressed to stop being sad or something. It's like, you know what I mean? It's almost very difficult to give any advice or whatever for this. I guess maybe some other really experienced pro can maybe give you some insight, but I think it's very much a thing you have to balance within yourself. Yeah, it seems very difficult to work on, actually.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a problem if it doesn't affect your gameplay.
Yeah.
I mean, it just means he's very passionate, right?
Yeah.
He wants to win. But I guess it does become a problem if you smash the desk and something actually breaks, which I think has happened to him before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was at the studio recently, and I actually interviewed him just after he got eliminated from GSL.
Oh, no, that's a terrible time to interview him.
Correct. The thing is, we had it scheduled, and he was a very good sport and did not tell me to F off.
Oh, no.
But yeah, I really wanted to interview him before the matches for that obvious reasons. But whatever, for logistical reasons, it couldn't happen. So yeah, I think that's about what I had prepared for you. Any closing words?
No, that's it. I guess I can shout out my parents really fast for always being supportive, and shout out to my team for supporting me also. But well, that's about it. Thanks for the interview.
That's awesome. You know what? I mean, with that last thing, I'm curious. What's your family's perspective then on your choice to pursue a career as a pro gamer?
So their perspective was, if I, graduate from college, I can do whatever I want. But they really wanted me to graduate from college first. So, and then after I graduated college and then was a little bit successful as a programmer, they were fully supportive. They weren't very supportive because I also played a lot during high school, right? They weren't supportive at that time very much. Are
you still in contact with many of your friends, from back home?
I mean, I don't necessarily contact them a lot while I'm in Korea, but when I go back, I'll hang out with them still. So.
Do they Are they interested? Do they understand like what it is that you're doing out here?
Yeah, they'll watch. Sometimes they'll watch together on Discord when I'm playing a match.
That's cool. Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for your time, Max. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much for watching. If you like this one, be sure to leave a like and a comment down below. If you really loved it, share it with some friends, and consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the video description. That's all for now. Until next time, friends.